The following audio was originally recorded live and broadcast through the facilities of Trent Radio on November 15th, 2019. I'm Justin Evangelo. This is Disenabled, the show where we enable the disabled. So happy again, as always, to be back. And I have to give props to my in-studio guest today, Kyle Rawn, because he severely screwed up his ankle, and like a champ, he is here to talk to us today about his disability, his experiences, and hopefully, we'll see, his athletic experiences as well as his life experiences. So, Kyle, great to have you on today, man.
Thanks, Justin. Great to be here. And playing a little hurt today, but it's all in the name of enabling the disabled.
Well, I appreciate that. So, starting off, like usual, what is your physical disability?
So I've been blind since less than a year old. I lost my eyes to retinoblastoma, actually, which is a rare form of retinal cancer.
I had that.
Yeah, well, see, we're two of like 1.5 million.
I know.
Whatever the odds are. So, yeah, I basically grew up with it, which I feel is really of a benefit. You know, I get the question a lot, well, don't you wish you could have ever seen things and that? And it's just the way it's always been for me. I've never known anything different. And so I think that's allowed me a bit of a unique perspective when it comes to accomplishing goals and overcoming barriers, that type of thing.
So, okay, a lot of my shows have been based on the academic side of things with people with physical disabilities, whether it be in a wheelchair, suffering from meningitis or sight impairment. So I'm going to take a different approach today with you. What are some of your extracurricular activities and interests, hobbies? Because a lot of the time people say, well, they're fully blind. I mean, what else is there to do but listen to radio and read books and stuff like that, right? So what are some of those things that keep you busy when you're not on that hustle?
I was active as a youngster, so I always grew up in a supportive environment where I was always encouraged to tackle anything that I wanted to do. So I was always out and about in the community playing road hockey and football and things like that. And I learned at a young age that it was fairly easy to adapt any game to allow me to participate. A lot of my neighborhood friends just kind of went along with it, and at the end of the day, they didn't really notice any difference. We're still out there competing with each other and having fun. So I grew up in quite an athletic household, participated in a lot of sports, both recreationally and competitively over the years. And also grew up playing a lot of music. I started out playing the piano when I was young and quickly transitioned into the percussion end of things and got my first drum set when I was 7 or 8 years old, much to the chagrin of my parents. But managed to keep that up and played in lots of bands over the years and that type of thing. So I'd say music and sports are really my biggest hobbies. I mean, I'm still not as active as I used to be in either facet, but I do enjoy, of course, listening to lots of music and going to see live music and following that scene, and then big sports fan, obviously, as well. So.
That's great. So growing up, you mentioned there was the adaptability of certain sports and stuff like road hockey and stuff like that with your childhood neighbor friends. What sort of things would they do in order to adapt that to your particular impairment?
Well, actually, it's funny because I have a distinct memory of moving into a house when I was, I guess, about 8 or 9 years old. And next door to us, there was a bunch of kids playing hockey on the driveway. And I thought, wow, that looks like fun. I think I want to go over there and meet some new friends and try it out. I was never shy about doing that. So came running over with a hockey stick. And, of course, they're playing with a tennis ball, which, for someone that's blind, doesn't make any noise. Right. It's not very – and I had the hockey skill set, just without knowing where the ball is, pretty tough to get along with that. So I thought, hang on a sec, guys. And I ran over to a recycling box that was there and grabbed a pop can and crushed it and put a few rocks in it and grabbed a thing of hockey tape and put some tape around it so the stones would stay in. And then you've got a crushed pop can that's rattling around with stones in it, and made it a lot easier to follow. So stuff
so
like
cool.
That.
I never thought about that. That's so having this type of communal acceptance, even from a young age. How significant was that for you in not only being accepted, but proving to yourself that you could actually indeed do anything that a fully sighted person could do, even if special accommodations were needed.
Yeah, well, being that young, I mean, you don't really think of having to prove yourself, right? It's more about how can I join in this game that everyone's having so much fun with, and it's all about attitude, really. So, I mean, moving it forward in life, things got a little more serious, and I ended up, joining a blind hockey program in Toronto called the Toronto Ice Owls, and that's where I really started to learn that there was other organizations out there that were adapting sport and athletic opportunities for people to participate in, and I think it's important to realize that it's not rocket science. The essence of the game, whether it's hockey, baseball, football, soccer, and whatever your game is, it's easy to adapt. You don't really have to change the rules of the game per se. Sometimes it's just the equipment, or you might tweak a rule here and there and allow people to participate fully. And so I think as a child that was growing up with vision disability, I learned that early on, and you just kind of bring it to the table, and a few of the kids might grumble about it, like, I want to play with the tennis ball. And It's like, well, you know what? No, too bad. We're still playing hockey, and we're still having fun. So,
I like that mindset too. And it's interesting that you started with children, because I'm going to talk about this in future episodes, but it seems like the younger generations, because they haven't been, let's say, socialized enough, they haven't developed any sort of stigma where it's like, oh, this person's different, let's make a huge fuss out of it per se, which is interesting.
Well, kids learn stigmas and stereotypes from their environment, right?
Oh, for sure.
It's a nurture thing versus naturally kids are just wanting to belong, feel like they belong in their peer group, and feel like they can participate in things they want to do. And, that's really a blank slate. The stigmas and the stereotypes and the attitudes, unfortunately, that some people take on later in life, they're a product of environment. And it can go the same way with people with disabilities. I see quite a bit of it working in the accessibility field. Unfortunately, there are parents out there that believe that their kids are unable to do certain things, mm-hmm. and so they tend to shelter them. Johnny can't go outside and play hockey with those kids because he can't see. So instead of playing hockey, why doesn't Johnny stay in and listen to the radio, as you said, or whatever the stereotype's going to be, right? So that's the unfortunate thing, and I encourage parents out there to allow their kids to believe, and work it out so that, fight the battles for your kids to enable them to participate. And there's far more opportunities these days for kids with disabilities, not just visual impairments, but all types of disabilities, to participate in sports and physical activities. And I think that's super important that they have that chance to do that.
For sure. So you did play for the Ice Owls. How long did you do that?
So I came across the Ice Owls when I was 12 years old. The Ice Owls is a recreational program. It started way back in the 70s. There were two original groups of people that got together back in the 70s and decided that blind hockey was not out of the question. And the Toronto Ice Owls were one, and there was a team based out of Montreal as well. And so they're the two original. So when I was 12 years old, I was at a charity event for Variety Village, which is an organization in the Toronto area that encourages kids and people of all ages with all types of disabilities to participate in athletics and sport. And it's a great charity program, great not-for-profit program, and it's been around for years. I was a part of the Variety Village, and so I found out about this charity hockey game that they were holding, and the Ice Owls were part of that. And so I went and saw that first game, and I just thought, oh, this is what I want to do, So immediately I started bugging my mom. And, Mom, I want to play. And she said, well, they're adults. Like, you can't just go out there. And so I bugged her for years. And finally, when I was 14 years old, just about turning 15, I got a call at the house from the gentleman that was leading the Ice Owls at the time, a gentleman named Ed Parento. He came on the phone and started, talking to me about the team and said, well, I know you want to play, but you're going to have to wait a couple of years. You have to be 18. It's insurance stuff. And at that age, you just think, that's BS, man. Like, I just want to skate and play. Yeah. And so he said, listen, how big are you? So, pretty big kid, I'm about 5'8", 5'9", about 160 pounds. And how old are you? So I'm turning 15, sir. He said, well, can you lie? Said, sure, I can.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up joining the team. So I played a bit underage. Played with them from about the age of 14, 15 till I was about 19 or 20. And then I went away to school and lived in Ottawa for a long time and joined up with a group that was kind of a fledgling group out of the Ottawa Valley area and played with them for a while as well. So
that's great. So with your time there, that's about a good 4, 5, 6 years. Did you find that there were any sort of stigmas surrounding the hockey team, either on the ice, off the ice, or from external sort of parties, where it's like, well, this basically framing it in such a way as, oh, it's just a bunch of, blind guys trying to not show off per se, but looking for ways to, basically try to recreate something that's inauthentic. They're not as good as like an NHLer, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. I think, amongst the team, everyone had a real good attitude about it, right? But outside, I think people would wonder, what's this all about, right? We got these blind guys out here playing against our local fire department, whatever, for this charity game, and it would pique people's interest. They'd want to know how these guys do this, and from the other team's standpoint, sometimes we'd probably they just kind of show up and they're like, this is going to be a bit of a joke, we're going to skate around with these blind guys, and they find out pretty quickly that that's not the case. We were a very, very competitive team. And we had, there's varying degrees of sight, right? So a lot of guys had pretty good vision and could move pretty well. And then, I had the younger guys like me that would skate around 100 miles an hour and just try and skate through the boards. And then you'd have some older guys that were, crafty veterans, so to speak. So everyone had their skill set, right? And other teams would figure out pretty quickly that it wasn't going to be a picnic. So
that's great.
I think any sort of attitudinal stuff that we faced either on the ice or off the ice was dispelled pretty quickly once the puck dropped.
That's so awesome to show them that you are just as capable at showcasing talent. Was a diversity of talent encouraged on the team?
Yeah, it's always been. You know what? It's come such a long way too. I mean, I'm not involved in the game so much anymore, but I have a lot of friends that still play, and some of them that play at quite a high level. I grew up with the guy that's now the goalie for the Canadian national team. So yes, we do have a Canadian national team now, which is a huge step, and that's fairly recently. Every year they have a large tournament in Toronto where people from all across Canada and the U.S. come, and they get pooled into different divisions depending on site level, talent, hockey skills, that type of thing. So it goes right on from the open division. You don't even have to have played the game before necessarily, right up to the competitive level where obviously you guys are flying around pretty good. So it's come a real long way. The participation across both Canada and the U.S. is huge now, and they encourage people of any level of vision. There's a couple of individuals who are deaf-blind that play, so it really does vary, and it's a very welcoming environment, all across the blind hockey community, which is very, very large compared to what it used to be, and growing. Actually, blindicehockey.com is a pretty good reference point for anyone that wants to learn a little bit more about it. You can see lots of videos there and stuff, and I encourage people to go down to the Mattamy Center in March to check out the blind hockey tournament. It's a lot of fun.
Not to degrade what you just said, one of the big problems I found growing up in a smaller town, because I did want to involve myself with sport, is that in a lot of small towns, obviously, it's supply and demand for these huge hockey programs or any sort of sporting programs. And if the supply is not there of people who can't see, then the demand's not going to be there. And of course, sometimes parents don't mind navigating the challenges of commuting and whatnot, but sometimes it's a huge hindrance.
Of course.
What would your solution be for anybody living in an urban type center? They have sight impairment, to any degree, or they're fully blind, but they want to be active with a contextual community setting with friends or with neighbors like you were when you were young.
Right. Well, I think depending on where you live, there are resources available to you, and you're right, a lot of the stuff is kind of centered around the urban centers, Toronto and Ottawa here in Ontario, and obviously the larger cities across the country. But the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, CNIB, they've really taken a lot of steps towards supporting recreation and activity, and to the point where they have a whole division of their business model that's aimed at getting people involved in recreation in all types of communities. So you start with a resource like that. And I think also I would encourage parents of children who are blind or visually impaired or have any type of disability, really, reach out in your community, try and find people who have children with other disabilities, that type of thing. See if you can start a bit of a grassroots thing. Sometimes all it takes is parents connecting because, the children aren't able to network the same way that the parents can. And,
sure.
And I think it starts with the parents believing that their children can accomplish things and can participate in sports and recreation. And so by creating a grassroots movement, you can find opportunities for your kids to come together and join in any activity they please, really. And it just takes a little bit of imagination and creativity. When blind hockey started in 1974, I think it was, they weren't looking to reinvent the wheel, right? You don't have to, like I say, reinvent the whole game or the sport or the activity or whatever. Just find what works, It could be as simple as trying to drum up funding to obtain a tandem bicycle, right?
Yeah.
And I used to do a lot of tandem bike riding. If you live in Toronto or Ottawa, there's the CNIB chapters there associated with tandem bike riding groups. And that's a great way for people of all abilities to get out and take a leisurely ride once a week or take it a step further and get into some real heavy training. I know there's quite a few people that take it very seriously and can ride for miles. So I think it's just about understanding what resources are available and then getting a little bit creative. If you live in a small place, a rural environment that's well away from any urban center, it may take a little more effort to kind of put a grassroots thing together. But I just encourage, parents of children to, talk amongst each other, share ideas, and don't be afraid to let your child try things.
For sure. You don't want to demonize failure either, because a lot of the times, especially, I'm talking from personal experience here, a lot of the times parents say either A, I don't have the time, or B, what if it fails and this is a lost endeavor. That's the complete wrong mindset to have. Obviously, if you're going to put the time in, you want to see it do well. But even if it's a failure and your child had a great time doing it, it was definitely worth the while, I think.
If something doesn't work, then there may be aspects of that try that do work, and that you can incorporate down the road. It could just be as simple as taking a regular football or a soccer ball and tying a plastic bag around it real tight so that when it's flying through the air, it makes a rattling sound, and when it's rolling around on the ground, then the person with the vision disability can understand where the ball is and chase it around, that type of stuff. I mean, one thing that athletics and sports and similar activities, physical activities, can really do for people that, especially those with vision impairments, and I can only speak to this because of my experience, but the tracking, audio tracking of things, like, it really does pay huge dividends down the road, even from a mobility standpoint. So if you have a young child that's got a visual impairment, teach them and encourage them to follow balls with bells in them, roll them around the house or roll them around the yard, or get them used to using their ears to track where that ball is or where the puck is, or that soda can that I talked about.
With the rocks.
Because later in life, when they're learning how to be mobile in their communities and even listening for traffic and stuff like that, it really does. There's so many skills that you can learn, aside from obviously the bonuses of physical activity. There's so many skills, life skills, that are learned, from team participation right down to the audio tracking stuff. So.
Yeah, no doubt. I really appreciate that sort of a confidence boost for anyone who may be listening disabled or not, obviously, I try not to focus on the negative too much with this show, but sometimes it's inevitable and it happens. So it's nice to have a nice face come in here and say, it's not as hard as you think. It's, you don't have to climb Everest or
I don't know about you, but I still have a face for radio. Nice
someone told me
faces.
that.
Yeah.
Someone told me. I
Great,
get that
yeah.
all the time. So I'm glad they can't see us.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, good. No, listen, I think it's important for people to look at, understand the resources that are available, especially now that we have the internet. Everything from Ontario Blind Sports Association, you can get ideas there. Variety Village, as I said, if you live in the Whitby area, the Ability Center, there's so many more opportunities now for young people to get involved in physical activity and stuff than there was even when I was growing up, right? And that was 30 years ago. We've come such a long way.
For sure. Okay, to wrap up, because we are running a little bit tight for time, but we've got time for, looks like one more question according to my watch, which is always 2 minutes fast, because why not? Is there any last remarks you'd like to share? I know you've beat this nail, you beat the nail right on the head with be confident. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. For parents, be encouraging of your children and so on and so forth. Do you have any advice for people, whether it be children or youth, coming up with any sort of physical disability, especially sight impairment, because you can speak to what you know the best?
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of advice or remarks for them if they're looking to get involved, either with like anything, gym, yoga, any sort of sport like baseball, hockey, anything like that?
Just don't be afraid to ask the questions, whether you're a parent or an older person looking to get yourself involved. You don't worry about what you can't do. Focus on what you can do and how that can be achieved. And I do think it's so important, even for individuals who are adults and suffer vision loss later in life. There's so much to be said for the confidence of being able to socialize with peers, participate in activities with peers. There's so many things you can do. It doesn't have to be playing hockey or basketball or goalball. It could be, dragon boat racing. There's blind and disabled sailing clubs. I think what you'll find is that once you get out there and try things, that people will be a little more accepting than maybe you think they would.
For sure.
Don't be afraid to try stuff. And parents, don't bubble wrap your kids, please.
If I had a dime for every time I heard that, boy, I could buy myself a nice steak dinner. Kyle, Ron, everybody, thank you so much for taking this afternoon to talk to, whoever may be listening. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. I enjoy the show. I've been listening, so you do a great job, and thanks very much for having me today.
Always nice to have fans. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for everybody who joined the both of us today. This was a lot of fun. Next week, if all goes according to plan, I'm taking another stab at the academic side of things with a person who keeps switching their job title from one day to the next, so I won't introduce her formally. We'll see how that goes in contacting her and having her. I'm hoping to have her in studio. Thank you so much again. Have a great one, and I'm out.